Some birds treat the sky the way we treat a hallway. While we celebrate surviving a 6-hour flight, there are birds that stay in the air for months, cross entire oceans without a single landing, and climb higher than passenger jets. No engines, no refueling, no maps, just feathers, instinct, and a body tuned for the impossible. These 5 birds don't just fly, they shatter the limits of what a living thing should be able to do in the air. One of them flew nonstop from Alaska to Tasmania. One hasn't touched the ground in nearly a year. One was found 7 miles up, directly in the path of a jetliner, at an altitude where a human would lose consciousness in seconds. By the end of this, the way you think about the bird outside your window will never be the same. Let's start with the one that just rewrote a world record. Birds have been perfecting flight for more than 100 million years, and evolution has pushed a handful of them to extremes that read like science fiction. None of this is exaggeration. Every record you're about to hear was measured with satellite tags, tiny tracking devices, and hard data pulled off the birds themselves. In October 2022, a 5-month-old bar-tailed Godwit lifted off from the mudflats of Alaska and pointed itself straight out over the open Pacific. It didn't stop. Not for food, not for water, not for sleep. 11 days and 1 hour later, it landed in Tasmania, 13,560 kilometers away, the longest non-stop flight ever recorded for any bird. Think about that. This bird flew farther than New York to Tokyo and most of the way back, without a single break, powered entirely by fat it had packed on before takeoff. To make the journey, it did something almost unthinkable. Before leaving, it shrank its own digestive organs, its stomach and intestines, to save weight and grew its flight muscles instead. It essentially rebuilt its body into a living fuel tank. During the crossing, it burned through more than half of its body weight. It flew day and night over thousands of miles of water with nowhere to rest, navigating by senses we still don't fully understand. And here's the part that stuns biologists most. This was a juvenile, making the trip for the very first time, with no adult to follow. The route was written into its genes. It simply knew. Researchers had tagged the bird before it left, so they were able to watch the entire impossible journey unfold on a map dot by dot across a vast and empty ocean. Now meet a bird that makes even that journey look like a warm-up. The common swift, a small, sickle-winged bird you've probably seen screaming over rooftops in summer, holds a record that sounds invented. It can stay airborne for 10 months straight, not 10 hours, 10 months. When swifts leave their nests at the end of summer, tracking devices show many of them do not land again until they return to breed the following year. They eat in the air, snatching insects on the wing. They drink in the air, skimming droplets from the surface of lakes. And most astonishing of all, they appear to sleep in the air, climbing up to nearly 2 miles high at dusk and dawn, then gliding in a half-shut-down state through the night. For nearly a year, the sky is their ground. Their legs are so reduced that a swift stuck on flat Earth struggles to take off again. Landing is the dangerous part. Flight is home. A young swift, after leaving the nest, may fly continuously for 2 or 3 years before it ever lands to raise chicks of its own, clocking up hundreds of thousands of miles without stopping to rest even once. To a swift, in other words, the solid ground beneath your feet is the strangest and most dangerous place in the entire world. If the swift owns time in the air, the Arctic tern owns distance. Every year, this slender seabird flies from the top of the world to the bottom and back again. From its breeding grounds in the Arctic, it chases summer all the way to Antarctica, then returns, a round trip of around 71,000 kilometers. It doesn't fly in a straight line, it follows looping ocean paths, riding the wind, so the real distance covered is even greater. Because it migrates from pole to pole, the Arctic tern sees more daylight than any other animal on Earth. It lives in almost endless summer at both ends of the planet. But the number that truly breaks your brain is the lifetime total. Arctic terns can live 30 years or more, and over a lifetime of these migrations, a single tern may fly more than 2.4 million kilometers. That is the equivalent of flying to the moon and back, 3 times. A bird that weighs about as much as a smartphone will, over its life, out-travel every astronaut in history combined, powered by nothing but its own wings and a hunger for endless summer. Follow a single tern for 1 year, and you would trace a long, lazy S down the Atlantic and back up the far side of the globe, chasing daylight the whole way. The next bird doesn't break records for distance or time. It breaks our understanding of how animals find their way at all. Take a homing pigeon hundreds of miles from home, carry it in a covered box by a route it has never seen, release it in a place it has never been, and it will fly almost straight back to its own loft. For centuries, nobody could explain it. Now, scientists believe pigeons carry something like a built-in compass. They can sense the Earth's magnetic field, using it to know which way is home even under a blanket of cloud, with no sun and no landmarks in sight. Some research suggests the iron behind that magnetic sense may even be recycled from worn-out red blood cells in the bird's own body. They also read the position of the sun, memorize whole landscapes, and, remarkably, may navigate by smell, building a map out of the airborne scents drifting around their home. Layer all of that together, and you get a creature that can be dropped almost anywhere on the map and calmly point itself in the right direction. We needed satellites and a network of atomic clocks in orbit to do what a pigeon does with a brain the size of a fingertip. It's a humbling reminder that some of the most advanced navigation on Earth was already flying over our rooftops long before we ever invented the map. And finally, the bird that flew so high it collided with history. Meet Rüppell's Griffon vulture, the highest flying bird ever confirmed. In 1973, over the West African country of Côte d'Ivoire, an airliner cruising at 37,000 feet struck a bird in midair. When engineers examined the remains pulled from the engine, they identified it as a Rüppell's vulture, flying 7 miles above the ground at the same altitude as a passenger jet, in air so thin that a human would black out and die within minutes. How does it survive up there? Its blood carries a special form of hemoglobin that grips oxygen far more tightly than ours, letting it breathe where almost nothing else can. These vultures routinely soar above 20,000 feet, scanning hundreds of square miles of savanna for a single meal, riding columns of warm air to the very edge of where the sky itself thins to nothing. From a Godwit that crosses oceans without stopping, to a Tern that flies to the moon and back 3 times, to a vulture at the cruising height of a jumbo jet, these birds don't just live in the sky. They own it. Subscribe, and the next thing you learn will be even harder to believe. Bird strikes at that altitude are almost unheard of, which is exactly why this single collision became legendary among biologists and pilots alike. Subscribe. The next thing you learn will be even harder to believe.